everyone, and welcome to the Slay with the Shade platform, the platform that aims to encourage and empower people when it comes to their financial well-being, their career, and just general lifestyle choices. In this video, I'm going to be focusing on credit files and credit scores and just talking about my credit file journey. So I posted something on my personal story, basically talking about how my credit file used to be very poor and it's now excellent. And I got loads of questions like, how did you do that? You know, what tips would you give, etc. So I thought this would be a really good video to start with, just sort of describing my credit file journey, because it really delves into the poor financial decisions that I made in the past. And I think it will really help give an overview of my journey from then until now, which is pretty much kind of what this whole platform is about. I really want to encourage people, and I know how it feels when you're on a roller coaster with your finances. I know how it feels to be in debt. I know how it feels when you log into your credit file and you see very poor and it just feels like there's no end in sight and that it's never going to get better. And I'm just sort of here to kind of spread that encouragement that, yeah, you can 100% improve your situation, even if it feels super dire and even if it feels like it's never ending. You can improve your finances, you can improve your credit score. And now, as I've mentioned previously, I'm not a financial advisor by any means. I've worked in financial services for over 9 years. My specialism is not actually in personal finances. So if you are looking for sort of tailored advice and professional advice, then I would always say speak to a qualified professional about your situation. But this is more really just for me to sort of share my experiences, share the growth that I've gone through over the years with it, my roller coaster journey, so to speak. And yeah, just really encourage people that, trust me, if I can improve it, anyone can. So yeah, let's get into it. So the first question I got is, how did your credit file get to very poor in the first place? No shade, just curious. Well, back in the day, your girl was very financially irresponsible. I mean, I cannot even stress how bad I was at managing my money. And I think a lot of it was a combination of, like I say, just making poor financial decisions, being bad at managing money, not really being financially literate, if that's the correct term to use. So I didn't really understand that the decisions that I was making towards my finances at the time were going to contribute to my overall financial health in the future. I just wasn't thinking like that. That wasn't the kind of mindset I had at the time. And I didn't get taught anything in school or throughout my sort of educational journey to really prepare me for, you know, like big financial decisions that you might want to make later on in life, and how important your credit file is and how important it is to manage your money and how important it is to save. These are all things that I had to learn the hard way. It's been a journey. If only you knew how bad I was this time all these years ago and how hard I've had to work to get to this point. Trust me, if I can do it, you can. But yeah, anyway, I'm digressing a little bit. So yeah, making really bad financial decisions. So I had a car at the time and my insurance was, I want to say my insurance was about £150 a month. And I was earning about £300 a month, maybe £350 at best, excluding student loan, etc. Where did I really think I was going? I was basically spending half my monthly wage on my car. That's not including petrol or road tax or service or MOT or general kind of damages or faults that might come up. Essentially, I couldn't afford the car. And I think that was, again, talking back about making poor financial decisions and stuff, I didn't really have that mindset to be forward thinking when it comes to my finances. I was very much thinking in the moment. Like, I did think, oh, that's like half of what I make a month, but it's fine, it's all right. Like, you know, I can manage on £150 a month. So yeah, so that was just an example of some of the poor financial decisions I made. On top of that, I missed a lot of payments. So I wasn't sticking to my credit agreements. Even if it was just like a nominal missed payment, that really impacts your credit file. So yeah, that's one of the things that contributed to my credit file becoming poor. I had multiple outstanding debts. So I had student overdrafts, I had credit cards, I had a catalog account. And yeah, again, being young and seeing this £3,000 student overdraft account, I thought, yeah, I'm rich. Didn't really think about the part where I had to pay it back with interest, but that's another video for another day. But yeah, so all of that I would say is what sort of contributed to my credit file becoming very poor. Another question I got was, what areas do you think impacted your credit file negatively the most? Missing payments. Missing payments absolutely destroys your credit rating. Even if it's one little small missed payment, it really, really, really can hurt your credit file. And generally, lenders just don't like to see that. If they're going to want to borrow someone money, they want evidence that this person is going to pay it back. And they want to see kind of the history of that person being able to pay it back. So one thing to bear in mind is your credit score is one thing, but your credit history actually makes up the bulk of your whole credit file. And there are people out there that actually have a decent credit score. So, you know, the actual score might be a high number, but their credit history is absolutely just a mess because they've like got several missed payments, etc. So again, creditors wouldn't really want to lend to that person because they don't have that confidence that the person is able to repay. So yeah, I would say missing payments really affected me. Of course, when you log into your credit file and it talks about areas that are impacting you negatively, missing payments was definitely up there. Another thing I believe impacted my credit file negatively the most was having arrangements to pay. So what I used to do back in the day, if I couldn't afford to make my my agreed payments every month, or if I'm honest, if I just didn't really want to, this is me being real, what I would do is I would contact the companies and say, can I pay a smaller amount? So let's just say, for example, my monthly payment for something was £100. I might call and say, can I pay £30? And they would say, okay, fine. If that's what you can afford, you can pay £30 a month. But what they would do was they would add something on my credit file called an arrangement to pay. That arrangement to pay destroyed my credit rating because what it does effectively, it's almost this, not the same, but I think it's viewed the same as almost being like a debt management plan. And those things absolutely destroy your credit file. And whilst obviously this is just my opinion, it's not fact. I don't know if that's the case, but I do feel that it had the same effect because whenever, again, you log in the credit file, it will talk about areas impacting you negatively, and arrangements to pay was one of them. And companies really hate to see that. Like, lenders really don't like seeing that you've had arrangements to pay in the past, which to some degree, one can argue you're almost kind of being penalized for struggling financially. The way they view it is you're not sticking to your contractual agreement. So I suppose that's why it's something that can be viewed very negatively. And the other thing I think really impacted my credit file negatively the most was having multiple outstanding debts. So having all of this sort of unsecured debt, and then on top of that, not keeping to my contractual payments for those debts, and yeah, just I suppose not really kind of making a dent in the amount of money that I owed. I think that definitely was another factor because the more I cleared my debts, the more, of course, I saw improvements in my overall credit score and credit rating. So yeah, I would say missing payments, having arrangements to pay on my credit file, and having multiple outstanding debts are definitely the areas I believe impacted my credit file negatively the most. So another question I got was, what do you believe helped to improve your credit score? So now some of the things I say might sound really basic, but if anything, I sort of want to give that reassurance that actually some of the really basic steps are what actually make quite a huge impact on improving your overall credit score. The first thing I did was I actually checked and reviewed my credit file across all agencies. And what I mean by this is that, so of course, like if you're going to go for lending in the future, you don't really know what credit reference agency they're going to use. They could use Experian, they could use Equifax, etc. So what I did was made sure that I created accounts with all of the credit reference agencies, and I logged into all of them, and I just went through all of my accounts and just made sure that it was consistent. So companies will often report things at different times of the month. So for example, a bank might report your credit status, every 30 days. Some might do it every 6 weeks, every 10 weeks, etc. But what should be consistent should be things like the date you opened the account. If it's a closed account, the date the account was closed. If you had a debt on the account, the date it was paid off. And all of these will really help because let's just say, for example, you have an account that's in default and one credit reference agency is saying that you paid it in one day and then the other saying you paid it 6 months later. That means that it's going to take an extra 6 months for it to come off your credit file on that credit reference agency than it would on the other. And like I say, you don't know what credit reference agencies companies are going to use when you eventually want to go for credit in the future. So you really want to make sure that there's consistency in regards to things like dates and just in general that there's consistency. I've had to pull companies up many times when I've noticed that they've either reported a date wrong or they've reported that a payment wasn't made when it was, or they've reported that the account was open later than it was. Because again, because things stay on your credit file for 6 years after the event has taken place, you want to make sure that the dates are consistent. So that was the first thing I did, and that really helped, because I saw a slight improvement in my credit score across all the agencies after I'd done that. Another thing I did was never miss a payment again. I made it my mission that no matter what, I was never going to miss a payment. I made sure that I stayed on top of my payment dates, set up direct debits where I need to, etc. I just made sure I never missed a payment. I haven't missed a payment in about 6 or 7 years. Just never missed a payment. And what that's helped to do is really build this kind of picture of me, that almost like a reformed version of me, like, hey, okay, back in the day, she was wild and she was missing payments all over the gaff. But now she's so consistent, she never ever misses a payment. So it's almost like that previous history is no longer as important, because it's like, okay, this is how she manages her finances now. And that has really helped to impact me positively. I've seen it, it's moved leaps and bounds over the past few years, just from keeping consistency on making sure that I don't miss a payment, which is why I say that it's very important to check your credit file really regularly and make sure that there is consistency. So if you do notice that, and trust me, these companies do it, whether intentionally or not, it happens, where they may report a missed payment or a late payment when it's not the case, make sure you're challenging these things. Tweet them. That's what I do. I tweet them. They will respond in your DM straight away, and they will fix it straight away, because it's really important that your credit file is reflecting the status of your account as it is. They shouldn't be reporting information about you that's not factual. So if you do notice a slight irregularity and you kind of look at it and you think, oh, it's not a big deal, my credit file is already bad anyway, what's one extra missed payment going to do? That can make a huge difference. So yeah, I just made sure that I've never missed a payment. And touch wood, I'll never miss a payment again. Another thing I did, or should I say did / still do, is I always ensure that my credit utilization is very low. So what I mean by that is the overall credit available to me versus the amount of credit I actually use, I keep it at a very nominal amount. And the reason for this is it's something that's viewed very positively on your credit file. So when you log into your credit file, it will show you what your credit utilization is. And usually there'll be a green for it being really low. And when they describe, because credit files are quite good now at describing the events that are impacting you positively and negatively. And in the positive, it always tells me that one of the things that impacts me positively is the fact that my credit utilization is always very low. So just to help give a bit of context, so I have 2 credit cards, £4,000 limits on both. And then I also have a current account that has a £1,500 overdraft on it, which I never go into. And so you might as well say I have about just under 10 grand of credit available to me. And I literally spend on my credit card a max, maybe a couple of £100 a month. When I'm spending on my credit card, it's for things that I know that I was always going to buy with my cash anyway. So whether that be something for the house, or back in the day when I used to wear weaves, maybe my weave, whatever it is, I just used to always make sure that it was something that I'd already budgeted for with the cash that I actually have, so that I wasn't actually relying on the credit, and I would be paying it off every month. So I would spend using a credit card and I would pay it off every month. And this really looks good. This is sort of a practice that I believe really helps your credit file, and I believe it's viewed very positively to lenders and on your credit file as a whole. Some people will argue against this because, for example, if you're somebody that has previously struggled financially, then perhaps some people might say, is it really wise to have so much credit available to you? What if you put yourself back into debt? Personally, as someone who's been in debt and that has struggled financially, I can honestly say it's a place you never ever want to go back to. I mean, in Jesus' name, I will never see that part of my life again. However, I can appreciate that, sometimes situations might come up that force you to. But to some degree, as odd as it might sound, that kind of gives me a slight sense of comfort, because I feel like if, God forbid, a situation arose in my life and I have to max out my savings and I have to rely on credit, I do have that slight kind of comfort that I've got all of that credit there, and that I don't need it. But overall, that impacts my credit file positively, because it looks like you're managing your finances very well. You have all this credit available to you, yet you hardly use it. And when you do use it, you pay it back every month. So I believe it's those kind of approaches that have really sort of helped kind of uplift my overall credit score. Another thing I did, or should I say didn't do, was I avoided hard searches. I avoided hard searches like the plague. So throughout that whole period while I was rebuilding my finances up until this point, I've just avoided hard searches because I always knew that I wanted to get my mortgage, etc. So I just made sure that I wasn't making any unnecessary hard searches on my account. I didn't apply for any credit. I had so many moments when I just wanted to walk up in that showroom, treat myself to something nice, but I just said no. Like, until between this period of rebuilding my finances and the period of knowing that I was going to make a huge financial decision, which would involve a hard search, I said, nah, I'm not gonna do anything. And that has also really helped because, again, when you're looking at the areas on the credit file that impact you positively, it actually tells me that you haven't made a hard search in X amount of months or years or whatever. So that's another thing that I believe impacts me positively because it's showing that I'm not somebody that excessively applies for credit. And again, that I'm managing my finances well enough that I don't necessarily need credit. So that's another thing I didn't do. Another thing that I also did at the same time as when I was sort of looking at my credit file was just making sure that I was showing as registered on the electoral roll. A lot of the time, sometimes credit reference agencies can get that wrong and they say that you're not registered when you are, or for some reason you might get taken off the electoral roll and you don't realize. That's something that also impacts you. So I made sure that anytime if it was showing I wasn't on the electoral roll, I made sure that I put myself back on it, which also helped. Another thing I did is when I moved out of my mum's house, I changed all of my accounts to be registered at this address. So previously, all my accounts were registered at my mum's. And when I first moved, to be honest, I still had accounts that were registered at my mum's just out of pure laziness. But I remember kind of being told that actually that inconsistency doesn't help and that it actually doesn't look that good on your credit file. I'm not sure how much of an impact it has, but I did notice that when I had changed all of my bank accounts, etc., to reflect my current address, that's the same address that's registered on the electoral roll, I did see a difference. So I did see a slight uplift. Not major, but just a slight uplift. So I think that kind of consistency across the credit file looks good too. Another thing I did was I had a catalog account, paid it off like many, many years ago, and I just never used it. I never needed to. And one day I was like, you know what? I'm just going to close this because I don't use it. But I was reluctant to because something else that also impacts your credit file positively is having long-standing accounts. So again, another thing that shows up on my credit file as a positive is that I've got long-standing accounts. So like my bank accounts, for example, one of them I've had for 11 years, etc. Having long-standing accounts with good repayment history on them and consistency, etc., looks really good and helps impact your credit file positively. So I was a bit reluctant to close that account because I've had it obviously from uni days, but I wasn't using it. So I just thought, you know what, let me close it. And I noticed that when I closed it, my credit score went up. When usually, sometimes if you close a long-standing account, sometimes that can bring your credit score down. And also if you close down a credit account, it brings your overall available credit down. So if you are using credit somewhere else, it can actually make your credit utilization go up, if that makes sense, because it seems like, oh, you've got less credit and you're using more because you've closed down that other one. I hope that makes sense. So I was a bit concerned about that, but I was like, you know what, I just want to close this account down. I'm tired of seeing it on my credit file. And as soon as I closed it, it went up. So again, I don't know if having a catalog account is something that impacts you negatively, because I know that there are some types of lending that are viewed negatively by mortgage lenders or other lenders. So for example, a payday loan is always very much frowned upon. I don't know if catalogs are the same. I can't really speak on that, but that was just something that I noticed, that when I closed my catalog account down, my credit score went up. Could have been a coincidence, but just something that I noticed. And the last thing I would say in regards to trying to improve your credit score is patience. Patience is a real virtue when it comes to improving your credit file, because sometimes it is just a waiting game. If you have adverse credit, a lot of it is going to take 6 years for it to come off your credit file. So throughout the period of that 6 years, as long as you're remaining consistent with the way in which you're managing your money, as long as you're avoiding missed payments, you're avoiding taking out more debt, etc., you will see an overall improvement. And sometimes you just got to wait it out. You just got to wait out that 6 years for that stuff to drop off. And then again, you'll see a huge increase at that point as well. So a lot of it is a waiting game, but there are obviously practical steps like I've just described, and obviously so many others, of course, that you can take to improving your credit file as a whole. So I hope that that was sort of useful, or at least like useful for some. And I hope that sort of gives you an insight into like some of my financial journey. I have a lot more to share, a lot more stories, a lot more experiences to share over the course of this platform. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and if there's anything that you felt that I didn't cover or anything you want to kind of know more about in regards to my credit file journey, please do just drop me a DM or comment on this video and let me know your thoughts. But thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.